I just want to thank Gabby and the National Center for Performing Arts for inviting me for this evening. I really appreciate the chance to listen to the other speakers, and I should speak louder. Yes. Okay. Yes. Can you hear me now?
Maybe move the microphone a bit. So.
Okay. And anyway, the reason why I'm coming out is I thought rather than start with talking, I would start with a very small practice to give us a chance. No. We need it? Can you stand up? I'll speak like this. Okay? A little bit more. Okay, so I thought about it, and I knew that, we're having a density of information coming in. And you're getting all excited, right? And you've come and you're excited from getting here. So here we are with a very active brain. And from what you've already been hearing tonight is that from that active brain, the breath comes up more into our heads and our bodies get less and less contact. So I want to do a little thing I call self-touch. And it gives us a chance to just start to take a practice that can help us to dialogue with the state that we're in and how to allow the sense of the sensory touch and our attention to what's going on inside come into dialogue in this absolute most simple way as we can manage it. So I'll ask you to stand. Okay, and like Raf, I'm going to say, when I ask you to stand, we all correct ourselves into a posture that feels that we're better in our standing. So what I want you to do is to relax that. I want you to soften. I want you to feel as best as you can the skin on the undersurface of your feet. I want you to feel that you have air space in all of your joints, and that includes along the vertebrae. Okay? And I'm going to give you a few images just before we start. One is that along the spine, through the spine, we have a hollow tube. Right? The structure of the spine creates a hollow tube, and through that is the spinal cord, so the central nervous system, and it's bathed in a fluid. So in the core of our body is hollow and fluid. So breath, and I'll be also talking about sound, this has a singing flute, just moving structurally and energetically and physiologically through our core. So you're a little bit more at ease, airspace of the joints, and you're going to put your hands on your head for a moment. And with your hands on your head, I want you to notice that you could imagine having a small balloon in your belly. And that small balloon, it doesn't have to get big. It doesn't have to be a long breath. It's just there to give you a place and a location to have your breath inhaling and exhaling with the ease of a balloon. Okay? So from that, the singing flute, the core, the fluidity, and the balloon, these are receptive places for our physical thinking to give us a place to dialogue. Okay, so now your hands are on your head, and I want you to notice how much activity, and we're not going to correct it, just going to notice there's lots of activity, and you're letting your hands touch the skin on your skull, and it's really a delicate and tender touch. So you're not directing anything, and you're giving your hands a chance to begin to dialogue with the activity in your brain. You take a moment, and you'll notice that as you do that, you're breathing. And we're not going to correct our breath. We're not going to correct our posture. What you're going to do is bring in a quality of softening and melting. You take a moment, so your hands are communicating that softness, and all the activity of your thinking brain is beginning to just feel that it can soften with that communication of the touch, and allow that it's beginning to melt right through this singing tube and core. And you just notice that that is where you're putting your attention. And then you slowly let your hands come down. So I'm going to do this pretty quickly. I can do this for a half hour, but we won't. Okay, so we come down, and your hands now are touching around your ears and your eyes. And I just want you to notice that you can let the muscles around your eyes a little bit less effort. A little bit less effort, and any squeezing around your ears, you want to feel that they spread out. Spread out, and you're just going to continue down to have your hands along your neck. Again, lighten your touch, feel your skin, and allow that delicate, tender, feeling touch to come into contact with the activity of your throat. And again, that small balloon in the belly, capacity to the breath to become more receptive to the activity in your body. So it's melting, and it's melting through the core, and we continue down. And here we are at the top of the lungs, coming across, joining the heart. And again, just for a moment, you touch the skin. So the touch of your hand and the communication of that activity softens and melts however it wants to spread through the body, however it can go. And we come down by the heart, and underneath the heart is the big central tendon of our thinking of our diaphragm. And you want to notice now that the hands allow this sense of spreading. And in that spreading and melting, the diaphragm gets ever so slightly softer, and the breathing follows that. And we come down to the belly, and let your ankles and your knees just soften a bit. So now here we are with the balloon in the belly. And now this is underneath the diaphragm. So there's a core breathing to the periphery, and there's the lower center also breathing to invite the breath to rise and fill the chest. So this is not the first place that we want to breathe. So that comes down, and just we're going to come right on down, and I'm sorry you don't have so much room, and you're just letting yourself fold, and the hands touch along the skin, and they soften, so as if you were touching the bones. You come over the knees, and you fold the belly onto the legs for a moment, and just in your own time, and you come down, and you just feel the skin along the lower leg, and if you can, just for a moment, let your head hang, and let your hands spread out to allow your feet to be as big as the floor. Hang just for a moment, the belly's breathing, blood can come to the head, which helps the mind to relax. And then you put your hands on the back of your sacrum, and you follow, so your hands are guiding the pelvis. The balloon is coming back up, and you just unfold till you're standing. Notice the difference. A small one, mine was small because I'm excited, but it helped. My brain feels just a little bit clearer, a little bit more space to allow not so much thinking to keep the attention, but to bring the attention into the body and to give some guidance through a practice that dialogues with our breathing. Okay. Okay. That already caused some excitement. I'm curious what you had to say, but I'll have to wait. Okay. I would like to give you a little bit of background to my development in understanding the vital function of the breath in our expression. I started as a dancer. I love dancing. I still love dancing. But in learning to dance, I was silent. Dancers are silent. We don't breathe. We aren't given essential information about breathing in relationship to our movement. We're concentrating on that movement form, so we're concentrating on the capacity of our functional motor body to fulfill our dreams, to fulfill our expression. Silence is a mode in our dancing. When I started, I would say, later than most dancers who really start as a child or as a 12-year-old. And I started more as a young adult. And what I realized was I didn't have all those years to just learn through imitation. Imitation, I needed to use more of who I was to understand. I didn't have that kind of time. So I was thinking, maybe if I knew more about the body from inside, this would help me to learn faster. It wasn't true. You can't rush the body. The body has a way to learn. But it did help me to learn in a very different way. It already instilled in me, in this early development, to look at dance and movement from the inside. What is going on in my body? What is the feeling? What does it mean to be able to reach out with my arm? How can I bring it into an effortless state? Where's the beauty and the efficiency of that? So I needed information. I needed information to begin to understand what it means to perceive and what it means to observe. So this gave me a development of the functional body because that's what I was training as a dancer, my skeletal, muscular, motor function. But I started to see and wanted to explore what's the vital life sustaining? What is the energy inside my body? Because once you start looking into it, you get too curious. You want to know more. And so I started researching what's supporting my muscles, what's supporting the skeletal structure, what is the vital capacity inside my body that is informing this capacity to move. As I developed this, I've had teachers, and I've had a situation where when I started this, dancers didn't think so much about this. It wasn't part of our training. And I think I came from a generation like Ava that started to ask these questions. So for me, the biggest opening was going into the organs. Organs are not part of my functional movement. And when you say to someone, organs? What do you mean? My organs just function. I can't feel my organs. But it's not true. The organs are giving us a vitality. They are working directly with our nervous system. They are the system that creates the relationship between, in the autonomic system, of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic, as we already heard, is moving right to the skeletal muscles. When we hear a big bang and your hair stands up on your skin, that's the sympathetic nerves, just like an animal response going like a cat. What was that? But the parasympathetic that brings us and takes the blood circulation from the muscle and brings it to our digestion. So it brings us into our more restive digesting capacity in our nervous system. And it's the organs that have this direct link. Of course, I didn't know that when I started out. This is something that came up from getting more and more curious. How does this function? So I explored the organs by including breath and sound, but it was there to generate an internal sensory experience. I was looking at what's this physical presence of my organs in my movement. It was an intriguingly fresh and a new level of sensation in my physical presence, and it was influencing my movement form. By researching and going into this on a physical level, my voice arrived. I started to develop a foundation of including breath and voice in my movement expression, and from this experience started making vocal dances. I'll take a little aside. I hope I started making organ dances. I was very innocent, and at first people thought I was going to wheel out an organ. So it was a very experimental time for trying to bring the wild nature of the voice into the body experience in my dancing. This was really an important activity. To bring the expression of sound and language as being part of my movement form was to bring an articulation and a communication that I didn't have in my silence. This became a transformative experience. It came from an innocent place, but it allowed the boundaries to open to experimentation. Bringing breath and voice into the experience of moving integrated a new level of sensory attention, and it influenced my motor intention. And I discovered that breath and voice was the unifier of attention and intention. Thoughts and feelings could be articulated because I had a physical thinking. It was also getting articulated because I had a voice. What was I seeing? What was I feeling? Could it be spoken out loud? But could it be spoken out loud through my movement as much as through my voice? Quality of breath and quality in our sound, it informed the language in my movement. Quality in sensation in my movement shaped the quality of my sound. By varying these qualities of breath rhythm, sound, and movement, I began to have an interaction, a dynamic between these layers and between these aspects. And what I was looking for, and it's still true, is not to have them representing to each other expressively, but to find a way that I could use the sensory attention and allow the motor intention to be a communication. So the dynamic was an interplay rather than a representation. If they're representing each other, it diminishes the potency and power of the elements to communicate. Researching the organs through breath and movement and sound was an entry for the subtle shift in my sensory and motor experience. It opened up a dialogue between subconscious and conscious experience. There started to be a bridge between my feeling state and my body's functional movement. And I really felt that it was the presence of the organs that created that dialogue. Because the organs are still a large physical volume of fluid, weight engaging substance, an energetic vitality. We feel our heart. We have a sense of our lungs. We're hungry at all different parts of our digestion. So there is far more dialogue with our organs than we generally pay attention to. As a practitioner, I work from direct experience and then move upon reflection into formulating principles and theoretical outcomes. But it is the embodied practice that crystallizes my understanding. This understanding develops my self-awareness as a deep source in the creative, expressive process. This has been my journey to a point where I needed to look at how can I help a practitioner, a performance practitioner, to understand this approach? How can I help them? How can I communicate this? So I had to question, what does a practitioner need to learn to apply this in their expressive work? And this took me into the next phase of developing an approach that I call VMI, Somatic Practice. And in this, there's an integration between the actively combining voice and movement and breath. I researched each of the body systems working underneath the muscle and bone functional movement. So this went into looking specifically at the organs, the nervous system, the perceptions. I looked at the physiological functioning within each of these body systems. How is each system living in the body? How can I perceive it? And through this research, I discovered layers of awareness, layers of perception that gave new potential to my expression. So the research, the experience, the desire to communicate, the desire to create, I needed practices. I needed a way to do this. So I created within each of these inquiries into different levels of perception, physical practices, breath practices, vocal practices, movement and voice expressive practices, and bodywork practices, so that the individual has a chance to perceive within their own history, their own body structure, and their own perceptions. What is somatic practice? When you say this word, many people look very perplexed. Even for native English speakers, people say, what's somatics? If I say psychosomatic, people go, oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay. So this field that has many different methods, I keep looking at Ava because she's also a practitioner, there's many different methods, but I just want to give you a general kind of term for what is a somatic practice. Somatic practices give us a deep and detailed dialogue with our everyday habits, and through cultivating a conscious engagement with our internal physical experience. Defining physical awareness in the body experience can have an essential effect on our thinking, on our feeling, and on our expression. Knowing our body experience in more detail gives us a chance to develop and refine our perceptions. In opening up my perceptions, I want to open my spectrum of response to allow new experiences to inform my expression. Our internal world of perceiving can engage and merge with our outer expression. This interconnection between them is creating a new sense of wholeness in our being. It's informing our world of expression. Voice is audible breath. Voice is an extension of our body breathing. How we breathe is the foundation for our voice and gives dynamic support and flow of energy to our movement. When the breath is inhibited, our feeling state is diminished in our awareness. Breath is the bridge connecting voice and movement, guided by received sensation and awakened perception. Active breath is a practice I have developed over the years of research and is a key element in my VMI Somatic Practice training program. Active breath is a series of guided movement sequences, and in this I'm combining breath, movement, and sound to tune into the body presence and bring perceptual awareness into an active connection that integrates the quality of our breathing with the quality of sensation in the body and the use of our voice. The active breath brings a physical awareness into an attentive state of being alive and engaged with one's breath and movement experience. It gives us a chance to develop our understanding of breath awareness as a guide for following sensation of movement flow within the body experience. The active breath as a practice builds progressively from refined, slow, attentive movement patterns aligned with breathing, aligned with the movement of the spine, understanding how our eye movements can bring a sense of spaciousness through the whole body. And it evolves dynamically and sequentially into a more whole body breathing. And from that whole body breathing, we then have a support for going more into voice and rhythm, moving actively in space. By working with this entire active breath sequence, we develop, with this whole body breathing, a support for integrating the voice as a moving force through the body and as a living force actively moving in space. It brings a sensory attention into the body experience, and it helps us to modulate the expressive intention. It is a guide. It guides the intention of our movement, which becomes fuller, more felt, and at ease with less effort. We start to engage a sense of weight being moved by the breath, and also a sense of spaciousness in the breath that moves through the body with lightness and ease, and becomes then a lightness that we can feel in activity in space. I lay out this active breath sequence, and I like to think of it as a practice. So when we talked about not being perfect, but I also have to have some guidance for what can I do to bring myself into this state. So I like the word practice as a way that we continue to have a way to be in our bodies. So that sequence is laid out in a detailed, informative, and integrative practice. I want to just talk a little bit about some of the things that the active breath potentially can do for us. And when I'm talking about active breath, I'm talking about breathing. Okay. So the practice, it influences our postural balance. It gives ourselves a chance to align the skeletal structure by actively connecting the support of the spine with the rib cage and pelvis, and a connection to our limbs, to our arms and our legs. It vitally connects the organs, inner sense of fluid volume, and offers more support to our pelvic and thoracic diaphragmatic breathing. By engaging rhythmic, energetic breathing, active breath generates the sensation of breath as a circulation through the entire body. It activates our blood flow. It pours oxygen-rich blood into our brains, and it seeps into our muscles, while it's nourishing and cleansing on a cellular level. Combining breath, voice, and movement actively heightens our sense of rhythm and flow, helping to release stress and tension in our nervous system. What better tool do we have then to feel our breath as a living force, illuminating our expression and our creativity? Allowing the sensory attention in the felt experience to become more active, informing, guiding, and directing my awareness helps me to make choices in my expression. To define the difference between reaction and response has become very important. I think I'll make it. Okay, so when we do things in a reactive way, we're doing things habitually. We do them without any physical thinking, without enough feedback. So we want to come more into a sense of working with our sensory attention. And when we work with our sensory attention, we have more time to feel. There's more time in our nervous system. And the nervous system time is not in real time. It allows us in our observation to slow down, to start to identify. And then I look at the breath as a way of giving me a spectrum of choices. It's connecting the inner experience to my outer expression. It's a dialogue. I just want to say a few things in what is happening to us if we allow something to not be a habitual intentional motor response, but a reaction, but a responsiveness. I will take what I think are the perceivable states before we respond. We have attention, observation, absorption, acceptance, receptivity, recognition. These are all layers of our perception we experience before we come to an expressive response and before we reach out with the exuberance of our communication. It becomes a more open dialogue with what our presence is giving us. While not all of these states may be perceived and identified individually, these layers of perception develop a coherency in our expression, a sense of connection to self that opens our experience. This awakened, felt experience is more rooted in our comprehension and offers us courage, insight, discovery, dexterity, and nuance in our choices. It opens up our imagination, inspiration, and sense of ease in our being. We can express more fully and authentically. We have more understanding and empathy, which permeates our expression and bridges inclusion with the world surrounding us. Thank you.